Could you hear our moderator in the back?
No.
We're good. Can you hear me now in the back? All right. What happens last week at Boyne City, there was no microphones, and my wife said, "You yelled at everybody," but I was just trying to get it in the back. And I do feel a bit like a carpetbagger coming down here from Boyne City all the way to Charlevoix, although I assure you I've been down here probably on average of 2 to 3 times a week. My name is Tom Schraw. I've been practicing in Boyne City for 23 years. I'm a believer that what happens in our youth as young people sets up certain markers and buoys in our life as we play out our adult life. So I'm going to share tonight a couple of markers. The first one I'd like to share is I grew up in a family down in Drayton Plains, Michigan. I don't know how many of you know where that's at, but I grew up as the oldest of 7 children. My dad worked at General Motors, and my mother raised kids. That's what she did. And in those days, it was a different time. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I would have had 4 siblings at the time, and I was the babysitter. And Mom and Dad would go out. Mom and Dad would go out, and they'd say, you know, just don't burn the house down. So get them out of the house. If don't cook anything, don't burn the house down. So we had a lot of responsibility. And what happens 26 years later, if we fast forward, I decided to go to law school at the age of 36. We hadn't had a lot growing up, and I didn't have the resources to go to law school when most people do, but I had a successful career in transportation and logistics, shipping hazardous materials all over the world. I had a staff of 24 people out in Allentown, Pennsylvania to work for me, and we always had problems, and we always found solutions, and we were connectors. Connect a solution to a problem. But at 36, I decided to go to law school. And I bring that up because my law school was an hour and 40-minute commute for me. I made that commute 3 nights a week for 4 years. And the important thing I want to tell you about me and looking at the kind of candidate, the person that I am, is that you're going to elect somebody that has persistence and determination. Calvin Coolidge said, "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb." He said, "Talent will not. There's nothing more common than a talented man that's unsuccessful." He said, "Persistence and determination are omnipotent." And that's sort of been the story of my life. Coming here 23 years ago, not knowing a soul in Boyne City, and hanging out a sign. And we were very fortunate to have met Harvey Barnum, who allowed me to practice as a court-appointed attorney in 2 of his courts, and that helped pay the bills in those days. If you elect me, you're going to be certain to get somebody with grit and toughness and the determination to make a difficult decision. There's going to be difficult decisions. I know Judge Pytosh has made a lot of difficult decisions that have impacted your lives. This is a very important election, and I just ask you to give me a chance. I know most of you probably have signs in your yards. Most of you are supporting somebody. Look at me as your alternative candidate. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. My name is Valerie Snyder, and I am going to hazard a guess based just on the fact that you are here tonight that you might already know something about this campaign. And because of that, I am going to do something a little bit different in my introductory comments tonight. I'm going to spare you the litany of my legal experience and my community service involvement. So you should be happy about that. They are on the materials, though, in the back if you'd like to read them. Instead, I want to tell you something that you might not learn from my campaign materials, that you might not read in a newspaper article, that you might not get from one of my campaign ads. I want to talk to you about a couple of the lessons that I've learned from some very special people in my life that I think will translate well if I'm elected to serve as your next circuit court judge. The first lesson I want to talk to you about is one that I learned from my mother. My mother's name was Janet Schmidt. She was a 1960 graduate of Charlevoix High School. And my mother taught me to care about words. And my mother taught me this in very simple ways. She taught me this by playing Scrabble. She taught me this by playing Boggle, by doing crossword puzzles. And she taught me this by reading the words that she wrote herself, because she was a very talented writer. Why is that important in a judge? What difference does that make? Well, it matters in a judge because it's not enough to know the law. It's not enough to know courtroom procedure. It's not enough to even make the correct decisions. A judge has to be able to communicate with people. A judge has to be able to communicate verbally and in writing. And that is a skill that my mother started teaching me when I was a child. And I hope that at least the verbal communication skill, I hope that you will see that tonight. I hope by the time you leave here tonight, you believe that I can communicate effectively. The second lesson that I want to talk to you about, I think I have enough time to get through this, is one that my dad taught me. My dad's name was Josh Barnes, and he wasn't a lawyer, he was a businessman. He started a company called Lexolite, and one of the great things that my dad taught me was to learn from others. And I remember being a child walking through the plant with my dad, and he would stop at the plastic injection molding machines, and he would ask the guy working the machine, hey, show me how to do that. Tell me how to do that. Because my dad was never above learning from someone else. He thought that there was always something that you could learn from other people, and he wasn't shy about asking. He wasn't afraid to ask. And I've learned that same quality. And why is that important in a judge? It tells you something about people. It tells you that they have some humility, that they're not too proud to ask a question, that they're open-minded to what other people have to say, and that they care about what other people have to say, and that they recognize they can learn from others, that they listen to others. Those are also all good qualities to have in a judge. One thing no one ever taught me was how to cram all this into 3 minutes. So hopefully you will get to learn some of these other lessons as we work our way through the questions this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Roy Hayes, and my wife Kendall is here as well. She served as my campaign manager for the past 6 months. I owe her a huge debt of gratitude. Kendall and I are raising our 2 children, Catherine and Sloan, here in Charlevoix. I grew up here and I graduated from Charlevoix High School. I attended the University of Notre Dame where I studied philosophy. I went on to get my law degree from Washington and Lee University in Virginia. In law school, I got the opportunity to clerk for Justice Patricia Boyle on the Michigan Supreme Court. It was an internship in the summertime. I also got to work at the U.S. Department of Justice in the Criminal Division in Washington, D.C. After law school, I was selected to serve as a law clerk to Justice William Ray Price of the Missouri Supreme Court. I got to have input on which cases were handled by the Supreme Court of Missouri, and also got to assist Judge Price in researching and writing opinions that are published in the law books in the state of Missouri. I returned home in 1994 to Northern Michigan to practice law with my father, who was my inspiration to choose law as a profession. My dad had recently finished serving his appointment as a U.S. attorney United States attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, as appointed by President Ronald Reagan. Because my dad was the former U.S. attorney, when I came up here, I got the opportunity to represent clients in federal court from Detroit to Marquette. I handled criminal and civil cases. I handled felony federal cases involving drug charges, weapons charges, tax evasion, and other cases. I was lead counsel for the National Board of Medical Examiners on a week-long Americans with Disability discrimination case in federal court in Detroit. And in that case, I got to argue the appeal before the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, Ohio. And those are experiences that I appreciate that small-town attorneys in Northern Michigan don't usually get. I was blessed to work with and learn from my father for the first 6 years of my legal career. In the state system, I've taken numerous appeals to the Michigan Supreme Court and the Michigan Court of Appeals. I regularly handle cases in the probate court system. Last year I was appointed by the Attorney General to be the public administrator for Charlevoix County. I believe circuit court trial experience is crucial here, and having a qualified judge on the bench. Throughout my 20-year career, I've handled all the types of cases that are handled in the circuit court. I tried my first felony jury trial in 1995, and I've tried many felony jury trials since that time. Felony jury trials where my client was facing up to life in prison. I've represented clients in numerous civil trials, in divorce cases, in circuit court divorce cases, monetary disputes, personal injury cases, real estate disputes. I've got extensive trial experience in the circuit court. You have my firm commitment that if I'm elected, I will work hard every day to do the right thing, to make fair and just decisions, and I will follow the law without influence from personal bias. Thank you.
I'm Ed Engstrom. I went to school in Charlevoix just like Valerie and Joe. And actually, I went to 5th through 8th grade in this building. I remember playing King of the Hill out there. I remember the ice skating rink. I cherish this community. It's a great place to live. I graduated from law school and I stayed in Detroit for 12 and a half years, and then I had 2 kids. I realized I should come back here and grow up. My oldest son graduated from Charlotte High School. My daughter's going to be a junior. I love my kids. They're great kids. And when I take a divorce case, I look through kids' eyes. That's how I do a divorce case. I tell the client, it's all about your children. And that's my big thing if I get elected, is I'll make sure parents don't abuse their children so they don't have a rough enough life as it is in a divorce situation. You gotta cooperate as best you can. I know it's tough. I've done almost everything circuit court judge handles. I've been to bankruptcy court, federal court. I've been in front of administrative law judges for workman's comp, social security. I know the problems people go through. I hear it. I'm a listener. I listen to people. I absorb their problems, and I try to help them as best I can. I do my work efficiently. If you check the court records, you'll never see another attorney has filed something against me because I didn't do my job. I get my job done. I get it done efficiently and quickly, and I don't make excuses. If I make a mistake, I'll tell you I made a mistake. Excuses don't get you anywhere. Solutions do. I'm also a certified mediator, which means I have a neutral mind already, which a judge needs. We shouldn't have affiliations with any type of group in this race. I recognize that this is sponsored by 2 parties, but you shouldn't have affiliations with them as a judge. You gotta be neutral, you gotta not have any biases, and you gotta make a fair decision, a tough decision. The ballot you're gonna circle says it's not partisan for a reason. Stand by that. Educate yourself about the 5 of us and make an educated decision. Not because you think somebody's representing one party. That doesn't qualify you as a judge. Look at the big picture, the experience, the type of person they are. Are they a listener? I'm a listener. Sometimes people think I'm arrogant because I'm quiet. That's not the case. I'm just listening. I'm listening to what they're saying. And I try to pull the issues out like a mediation and resolve it. I volunteer quite a bit. My partner is a volunteer for Venetian. I've been to 48 consecutive Venetians. That tells you how committed I am to this community. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. To begin with, I would like to say what a great thing it is to see this room packed full of people that are so interested in our race, that all 5 of us have dedicated a tremendous amount of time to over the last few months. To begin with, I would like to tell you a little bit about my background and qualifications. I'm married, and my husband Vince is here with me tonight. My dad is here. My daughter will be here after work. She gets out of work at 7 o'clock, and I have a lot of friends here supporting me, to whom I'm grateful. I am a graduate of the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, and I went to law school at the University of Detroit School of Law. I've been practicing law for over 23 years, and I've spent the majority of my legal career in circuit court. I've also been before the Michigan Court of Appeals a fair number of times, and I'm a certified mediator for domestic relations cases, meaning essentially that I assist people to try and settle their divorce cases without the expense and stress of a trial as a mediator. And over the years, I've volunteered my time to a variety of different things, and I've coached t-ball for my kids. I've been a member of the Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra as a cellist. I sat on the board of the directors for the local mediation center, and I was also a member of the board of directors for the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan. And I was appointed by the governor many years ago to sit on the Michigan Domestic Violence Prevention and Treatment Board. Prior to having the privilege of serving as your prosecutor, or after I had that privilege, when I've been in private practice, I've had a variety of cases. The majority of the cases I handle are family law and criminal. And during my tenure as your prosecutor, I handled hundreds of cases on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan, from speeding tickets to child abuse, to home invasion, to sexual assault and murder and everything in between. And so I've been in the trenches as a trial attorney, and I've had an opportunity to do a lot of good for people who are crime victims. And that was a part of my job that I truly loved, being the people's attorney. I've also worked closely with local police officers and provided them with legal advice and guidance in that job, something else I enjoyed, and a lot of those officers are supporting me, and I'm truly grateful for that. I've been endorsed by 23 Michigan judges from as far south as Detroit and as far north as Sault Ste. Marie, which I believe is a testament to my reputation across the state and my professionalism. And in closing, I would just like to say that if elected, I will always keep in mind that for the people who are in front of me, who have court cases going on, it is most likely the most important thing going on in their life, and the most important case in the court. And I will always try to remember that and give each case my utmost attention. And I will also remember that the courtroom doesn't belong to me, it belongs to everyone in our community. Thank you to the chairs of both parties for hosting this informative event for us tonight.
Okay, can everybody hear me now? Is that better? No? I don't know how I can make it any louder.
Yeah, use one of their mics.
How's that one? Okay. The first question tonight will be answered by Valerie Snyder. It comes from Judge Prytosh. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, but doesn't have to take up the entire 2 minutes should they not wish to. What factors or considerations go into fashioning a sentence in a criminal case?
Is this microphone okay? Okay. In the circuit court, the criminal offenses that are decided in the circuit court are felony offenses, which means that they are offenses that are punishable by more than a year of incarceration. So sentencing is generally governed by sentencing guidelines, and sentencing guidelines send out a multitude of factors that the court must consider. Those factors, there's a whole bunch of factors. Those factors include prior offense variables, and those, prior record variables and offense variables. And then using those guidelines, the court can establish what the sentencing range should be for those offenses. So much of the sentencing that is done in the circuit court is in the discretion of the judge within those guidelines, and they're all set forth in the statute. There are a few cases that have a statutory maximum, or if they're punishable by life in prison, then the sentencing guidelines wouldn't apply to those.
The sentencing convicted felons, I think, is one of the absolute most important things that a circuit court judge has to do on a regular basis. It's a big part of this job. The court always has to consider, when sentencing an individual in a felony case, rehabilitation, restitution, and protection of the community. And the court needs to fashion a sentence within there's lots of factors. There's probably 50 factors in the sentencing guidelines. But the court has to keep in mind the facts and circumstances of the offense and the facts and circumstances surrounding the offender. And then the court needs to decide, is this person somebody who should be put on probation and rehabilitated? Or is this somebody who Charlevoix County needs to be protected from? And those are the factors that I would consider in sentencing a felon in the circuit court.
First, I want to know, why is that individual before me on a criminal charge? How did he or she get to that point? There's a lot of events in our life that can cause people to go astray, and I'd like to know that, just to get an idea how severe a punishment I should place on him or her when I look at the relevant factors, which the other candidates already hit. Every certain charge has different elements you look at, like, has the guy been in the system before? You score higher if you've been in the system before. You got misdemeanors, felonies, you score higher. And there's a grid that tells you what the guidelines are and whether or not you're going to go to jail up the street or you're going to go to Jackson Prison. You're also allowed to go outside the guidelines, especially if there's significant harm to the victims. That's what I look at, the harm to the victims. That's very important. We have restitution, but it doesn't work well because usually the defendant, the perpetrator, doesn't have any assets. There's nothing to collect. We have some funds, but it doesn't cover the victim's complete damages. And it's sad but true. I've been through that before and I've seen it. You can try a civil case, but still, judgment is a piece of paper and doesn't get you much. Thank you.
In fashioning a sentence for a convicted felon, a circuit judge, the law requires a circuit judge to take 4 things into consideration, and none of the factors are given more weight than others, and the judge has ultimate discretion in deciding which factors to give how much weight. And those factors are punishment, deterrence to others, protection of society, and rehabilitation. And restitution is something that also needs to be considered if there's a loss to a crime victim. And during the sentencing process, if you are a crime victim, you have an opportunity to make a statement to the court and about how the crime has affected you, and the court can give a weight to that as well. I agree with Joe that there probably is no more important function of a circuit judge than sentencing of felons. No more important job that has an effect on more of us than anything else, whether it's a ripple effect or a direct effect. Sentences must be individualized under the law, meaning that a person's criminal record is important, a person's family background is important, a person's remorse is another factor, and all of those things are required by the law to go into the sentencing of felons.
Let me see if I can make it just a little bit clearer. Let's say somebody's keyed Schraw's car and done $4,000 worth of damage, malicious destruction of property. That's a felony. And the sentencing guidelines might say you can sentence them between 7 and 36 months. So these sentencing guidelines give a range, a high and a low, that the circuit judge sends somebody in. And of course, the more serious the crime, the more months are added in that range. You might have a sentence range of 180 to 240 months. Let me tell you how I have thought about this. If you key my car, it probably did not change the trajectory of my life. I can take the car over and it gets repainted. Somebody, maybe they pay for it, the insurance, but it doesn't change the trajectory of my life. And we have a lot of young people who commit a crime, they don't change the trajectory of the victim's life. But if you come into court and you've touched your grandson in an inappropriate way, or you've harmed somebody in an inappropriate way, or even a breaking and entering when people are home, that is the kind of sentence that changes the trajectory of your life, and that's where you're going to see Schraub sentence people towards the maximum, when they start changing the trajectory of your life. Oops, not you.
All right, not one candidate used their full 2 minutes. We're on a roll. Question 2. This one is presented to Mr. Hayes first. What are some of the changes, if any, that you would bring to the circuit court?
Well, I think that I think I've said this before, we've had a very good, very fair, just judge on the bench, and so I don't believe significant change is necessary. I do believe that as the future, we progress in time, technology is going to, we're going to have to deal with the technology. We're going to have to deal with e-filing, with electronic documents, and I've got experience dealing with those because Grand Traverse has gone to those, and Antrim County has gone to those, and the federal system has been all electronic for many years. So I've got quite a bit of experience in that. I think that's one of the changes that will be coming down the pike. Another change that we will likely see in the years to come will be problem-solving courts, drug courts. Very positive developments in the legal system where we try to take people out of the system and allow them to address serious problems outside of the criminal justice system in terms of incarceration. Those are things that are not going to be immediate changes, but those are the types of changes that I see coming down the pike. So I'm not campaigning on for change. I think Judge Pytosh has done an excellent job, and we've all got big shoes to fill.
I mentioned this in my opening statement about divorce and how it can affect children. I want to find a means to make sure that the parents don't cause more problems with the children during the worst case than is necessary. When I am retained by a client, I give them a list of things not to do, and that list contains 104 things. It's a lot. There's a lot you can do with mess with a kid. And as a judge, I'm going to make sure the parents on my case are aware of that list. They should get it when they get the case starts, and they should abide by it. If they don't, and I know they didn't, there's going to be things that are going to happen they're not going to like. You have to protect the kids. Also, Joe hit on this. I've had a lot of clients that have some kind of addiction. They've abused something in some way. When I first started out, I was a public criminal defender in the metropolitan Detroit area. One of my first cases was a lady, criminal charged with some crimes, and she looked like she was 60. She was actually 40. She lost 20 years of her life drinking. And that's the first case that I realized there's a lot of abuse out there. A lot of people are ruining their life because of abuse. And it's just not substance or alcohol. There's other things. There's gambling. We have gambling in Petoskey. That can ruin your life. We've got to do something about the court system. And I will work to help those people as long as I know they want help. There's a lot of people that play the system. And I've seen them. And I know what they're like. And they're not going to play me as a judge. Thank you.
The way that changes typically happen in the lower courts, like circuit court in Michigan, are that they typically come from above. The higher courts make a lot of the decisions, as does the state court administrator's office. And the changes that are coming our way, whether we like it or not, Joe touched on a little bit, but they're going to be e-filing. There may also be some opportunities to have witnesses testify via telecom and things like that. All things that are helpful. For this particular county, if I got elected, I would try to have a more interactive website for the court where people could go on it and click on a link and get a copy of a form for a PPO and not have to go to the courthouse to get it. If you wanted a copy of the friend of the court recommended standard holiday parenting time schedule, you should be able to click on that and print it out where you are rather than make a trip to the courthouse. I too believe in utilizing problem-solving courts, as they're referred to. We do not have a sobriety/drug court or any mental health courts or veterans courts in this circuit. And I think that we need to explore that if we have the volume. And so those are things that I would definitely promote if elected. Thanks.
I think the change to Charlevoix County, it would be, in the best interest of the people, would be no change. I shared this with the Kiwanis this morning. E-filing is mandatory in south of us. Well, and in e-filing, if you're required to file your papers electronically, then you're required to know the computer protocols, and which requires you to hire an attorney. I can't even file I have a gal by the name of Vicky who does all my e-filing. And I think that for the folks that are born after 1982 and are digital natives, when their day comes, they can do e-filing. But for us immigrants that were born before 1982, I think Judge Petosh has held off e-filing. I think we should hold it off. I think it hurts your ability to approach the courts. It presumes that you have a computer. It presumes that you have internet access, and you're going to pay $8 to file it. I'm all in favor of people doing as much as they can without the assistance of an attorney. I've often told clients, number one, go to mediation. Number two, if that doesn't resolve your dispute, you can try it yourself, and when it gets too complicated, we'll jump in for you. But e-filing eliminates that possibility for 99% of the population. The other change that I wouldn't want to see happen is very frustrating for clients to call a friend of the court and not get a real voice. I would try to make sure that we always have a real voice available to folks. There's lots of problems with parenting time, custody, child support payments. They need a real voice to hear rather than a recording.
Well, I think this is a trick question because it came from Judge Petosh, so I think the answer is supposed to be no changes. Everything's just perfect. Actually, our circuit court is pretty darn good. And I'm going last, I guess I get to echo the other comments that were already made. We do need to increase the use of technology in our court system, both for access to the courts. When you should be able to access information about the court from a website without having to go down to the court to do that. You should be able to file documents with the court without having to go down there and do that. I don't know that it needs to be mandatory. Right now, the Michigan Court of Appeals accepts e-file documents and they accept paper documents. So you can have both of those systems going at the same time and really serve all of the people better. The other area where really courts have a limited amount of innovation that they can do, the other area where we could be more innovative is with the problem-solving courts, which are kind of alternate approaches to criminal cases. And one other program that's kind of has some foothold is what's called a Swift and Sure program for addressing probation violations. And the difference between that and the problem-solving court is a problem-solving court really focuses on treatment. It focuses on trying to solve the problem through therapy and those types of methods. A Swift and Sure probation violation program has the same type of goal, but not through therapy. It's interesting because what they focus on is assuring that every time there's a probation violation, you're going to jail and you know what the consequence is going to be. And the results of this in the courts that have implemented them is that they are finding people have less need to go to treatment programs because they are certain that there is going to be a consequence for their probation violation. And it's actually less costly than the problem-solving courts, and it has just as high of a rate, or just as effective in reducing recidivism. Thank you.
All right, the next question will be first answered by Mr. Engstrom. How many cases have you tried to a jury in circuit court?
I've never kept a number of how many cases. I haven't tried very many in Charlevoix because for the past 7 years, I've been a trained mediator. And as a trained mediator, I do my best to find facts through discovery to get the parties to agree to settle. Why do I do that? Because it's a known fact that when people settle the case themselves, they abide by it. If they're told by a judge how to run their lives, they violate the judge's order or don't follow it. So settlement is huge. And that's why I got involved with mediation, and that's why I volunteer at the center. and I ask them to give me the hard cases, difficult cases. And they give them to me, and I've got a higher than 90% success rate in resolving those cases. So, but in Detroit, I tried quite a few criminal cases, especially as a public defender. They don't pay much, right? The clients are getting paid by the county, so they take it all the way. I tried a lot of bizarre cases. I tried a divorce case once. I represented the wife. The husband didn't want to get divorced. Treated the wife like a trophy wife, and he was very, very obnoxious. She finally got divorced, but he set her up by pretending like she was torturing the kids with erasers, and the prosecutor filed charges. But I took that criminal case, and after 5 minutes, the jury came out and found her not guilty. So that's one of the cases, and the worst thing about it is those kids. Those kids were messed up after that. Real bad. Thank you.
I don't think any of us are going to have a number of cases that we tried an exact number, because in 23 years I've tried dozens and dozens of cases, but I have never kept track on a yearly basis. I can tell you that I've tried a wide variety of cases, like I told you when I gave my opening statement, and I have tried cases on both sides of the courtroom as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, and I've also handled 500 divorce cases since I went into private practice. Those cases don't typically go to trial. Typically they settle, but I have tried many divorce cases. And so I think it's a good question. I think it's significant, and it should matter to a voter as to what the person's trial experience is, because essentially, if you use a sports analogy, a judge acts sort of as a referee, and I think you have a better referee if you have somebody that has knowledge of every aspect of the game. Thank you.
I've been practicing here 23 years, and I'm estimating 2 to 3 jury trials a year. Now, these divorce cases that you heard about, they don't go to a jury. When I started probing the idea of running for judge, I went online and I pulled up a website from a judge down in Mississippi, and the byline was, elect me and you will have trials. And I thought, wow, well, that's an interesting concept for a judge to say, of course you'd have trials. But I find that more and more, there's so many layers of bureaucracy. We have case evaluation layer, we have a mediation layer, which I'm a big supporter of, and hopefully it resolves cases. But clients come into my office and they say, you know, I just want to get a judge to make a decision. Jury trials are an interesting exercise. There's a civic duty for you to participate if you can. They can be a wild card. I know that a couple of my opponents up here have tried cases against me in front of juries, and I think overall we're always surprised. But I want to encourage you, if you're called for jury duty, by all means, participate to the full extent. You'll learn a lot about people, and you'll learn some things about yourself. And you certainly, Steve Graham Sr. used to tell me, Tom, he said, if you go to a jury trial, even if your client's guilty, even if your client's a deadbeat, no matter what it is, he said, if you go and you do a good job, you'll pick up at least 13 new clients. That's always been my attitude, is go and do a good job for the client.
I also don't know exactly how many jury trials I've done in circuit court. I've done jury trials in circuit court, jury trials in probate court, and jury trials in district court, and of course bench trials in those courts as well. I'm not sure the significance of the number of jury trials in circuit court, because regardless of what court you're in, the rules of evidence are the same, and for the most part, the procedure is the same. And that's really what's important. That's really the experience that you get from a jury trial. This is an interesting question, because I wonder what the perception is about how many trials are going on in the circuit court. Because I think that people think there's trials going on every day in the circuit court, and particularly jury trials going on every day in the circuit court, and that's just not true. In 2013, there were 2 jury verdicts in the circuit court. So the perception that this is what lawyers and courts do all day, every day, is just not accurate. And I would also question the value of a trial attorney as a judge. I think the experience isn't important, but I would suggest that perhaps the qualities that make someone a really good trial attorney are not the same qualities that might make someone a really good judge. Think about a guy like Jeffrey Feiger. Jeffrey Feiger is probably a pretty good trial attorney. I haven't personally had the experience of seeing him in action, but I can hazard a guess. I don't think he's the guy I'd want sitting on the court, because the temperament issue is different. You need to know the rules of evidence, you need to know trial experience in order to be a good judge, but you also need to have temperament. So it's not the end-all, be-all of the qualification for a judge.
Okay, I think that we disagree. I disagree with Ms. Snyder. I think that circuit court trial experience is crucially important, and I assume that's why Judge Pytosh asked that question. It's true that trials are not an everyday thing. Trials, most cases don't go to trial. Most criminal cases plead out. Most divorce cases settle. Most civil cases settle. The vast majority, it's over 90%, which is why attorneys who practice in circuit court don't always have a lot of trial experience. But I would suggest to you, if you have never sat in the circuit courtroom during a circuit court trial, it's a very complicated, very, very important thing. And trial experience in the circuit court is crucial. And I actually have a lot of trial experience in the circuit court. I've tried felony jury trials, and the question wasn't about how many jury trials you've tried. I've tried tons of misdemeanor jury trials. The question was, how many circuit court trials have you had? I've had extensive experience trying jury trials, in felony jury trials in circuit court. I've tried divorce cases. I've actually tried divorce cases and had, those are not jury trials, but those are bench trials in the circuit court. And it's a whole other level of complication, and it does happen. Custody trials happen. I have tried circuit court jury trials in civil cases where people are fighting over more than $25,000. And again, if you ever sit through that, there's a lot going on in the courtroom, and I couldn't even imagine these responsibilities without the experience that I've gotten in trial work, in circuit court trial work over the past 20 years. I've had real estate trials, numerous real estate trials in the circuit courtroom. I think it's very important. Thank you.
The next question comes from the Attorney General's office. And the first candidate to answer will be Mary Beth Kern. How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law?
The way that any judge does that is to read the pleadings that are submitted by the lawyers, and generally you get very good summations from attorneys in their briefs of the actual law, and then their argument section are in a different section of their brief. But then after you read those, you need to check and make sure it's right, and you need to shepherdize, that's a legal term we use, but you look up and see if the cases that the person cited are still accurate and still good law, and you make sure that you've got good questions for the attorneys during oral argument, so that if they have weaknesses in their argument, they have an opportunity to explain that. And that's how I would prepare for something that I hadn't done before, or quite frankly, something that I had to handle before. Thank you.
How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law?
The question is not always about jury trials. Remember, the jury trials are never decided by the judge, they're decided by the jury, and The judge serves as the referee. Although there are a number of cases which come to the bench for a bench trial, and the judge does rely on two rules that he's relying on the attorneys to always apply, never lose sight of. For rule number one, the attorney never lies to the judge. And rule number two, the attorney never lies to the judge. And that's, so it's important. You wouldn't, you might be surprised at the shenanigans that attorneys try to pull. I was involved in a case up in Emmett County recently where the attorney was given 18 ways from Sunday to back off a statement and would not, and has been severely sanctioned for it. I think it was probably a case that the judge wasn't all that familiar with, but we did file briefs, we did file pleadings. We prepared for 2 years actually to have the trial, and once it was conducted, he recognized that the opposing counsel had made not only a misstatement but a bold lie, and she was severely sanctioned for it. So I think that the body of law, when you think about the law, it is so vast. It's from A to Z. It's a monster, and you can't know other than your relatives. They always think you know exactly the answer to their obscure question, but it's very difficult to know the entire law. But there's an adequate preparation time both for the plaintiff's attorney, the defense attorney, and for the judges hearing the case, and they need to take advantage of it.
Well, I would prepare for unfamiliar areas of law exactly the way that I prepare for cases now. I would research. The judge, of course, has the benefit of having attorneys usually submit briefs or other pleadings to prepare ahead of time. I would do my own research on top of that. Of course, make sure all the cases are up to date. And then the other thing that we're all trained to do and would need to keep doing is to spot issues that perhaps attorneys haven't spotted when they were briefing their cases. So I would do exactly the same type of research that I do now. And this question will happen. This issue will happen because the circuit court is the court that has the broadest jurisdiction of any court in our state. It's a general jurisdiction court. So any case that isn't specifically delegated to another court goes to circuit court. Only 18% of the circuit court cases are criminal cases, at least that was the data from 2013 in Charlevoix County. About another 25% of them are domestic cases. And then the rest of it really falls into this category of other civil cases. And so that's real estate disputes, that's superintending control, that's mandamus, that's administrative agency appeals. There are so many different types of cases that the circuit court hears that this will happen for people, and it's for the judge, and it's important to be a good researcher and be able to spot those issues and prepare ahead of time. That's how I would handle it.
The fact is, every case is different. And whether you're a circuit court judge or you're an attorney practicing law in Northern Michigan, every day is different, every client is different, and every client has a different problem. And this is really law school 101, where we all do the legal research. When we get presented with a new area that we're not completely familiar with, we go to the books. We look at the statutes, we look at the case law, we read and we study, and that's obviously what I would do if I was on the bench. Judges have the benefit of having the attorneys brief the issue from their client's perspective and argue the case from their client's perspective. But the judge is responsible for making the legal decision, so the judge should do his or her own legal research. That's what I would do. That's what I do every day. I handle cases, I've handled all kinds of cases. I had a case once where we were in circuit court arguing about whether it was legal for somebody to keep a cougar in a cage on their home. They had neighbors who were taking them to circuit court to have the cougar removed. And I was trying to defend the homeowner who wanted to keep his pet cougar. The point is, that happens every day. That's basic law school legal research skills, and that's really not a big problem.
I educate myself every day on the law. I attend or participate in several seminars a year. I read the Bar Journal, the Lawyers Weekly. I'm a member of various sections of the State Bar where I get all kinds of information that I read. But I don't know it all. None of these candidates know the law. I've been in front of judges where they have asked attorneys to brief the issue. Judge Petoskey on one occasion found a case out of Ohio that the other attorneys didn't find that was right on point. Some of the law that you find, though, gives the judge the discretion. That discretion is to come to a fair and equitable decision, and that's what I would do if I was the judge. I would do my research. I'm a strong researcher. I research all the time. I get emails for court opinions. I haven't had much time to read them lately because of this campaign. It kind of gets in your way. But I saved them, and I will read them, and I will digest them. But you've got to do your research. With the fast-paced world we have now, you can put in a couple words, and you can find what you're looking for. Hopefully it's the right law, and you apply it so it's a fair result for the parties in the case. Thank you.
The next question also comes from the Attorney General's office. If you became aware, first candidate to answer will be Mr. Straw. If you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of an attorney in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? And further, do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct?
I handled it just the way Judge Johnson handled the misconduct in this case that I was recently involved in up in Emmett County. He required, after the hearing, after he was gave the opposing counsel opportunity to change her story, he required the attorneys to share the expense of acquiring deposition or transcripts of the trial to make sure, absolutely sure, we could know exactly what this particular person said, and then gave us an opportunity to request, gave me an opportunity to request sanctions. It cost my client, probably in that case, about $2,200 in additional expenses between transcripts, between my hours to prepare, my appearance at 2 extra hearings that were unnecessary, and so there was a financial cost to that. I think the health of the profession would require a circuit judge. If you're absolutely certain that someone's committed a misconduct, remember rule number 1 and rule number 2, never lie to the judge, and never lie to the judge. If you pin somebody's ears back, they need to be reported, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct. I think you first confirm the misconduct, sanction it, and report it. The judges do have an obligation currently to report on ethical misconduct. I think that absolutely should be a requirement for judges to report attorney misconduct. Attorneys are a self-policing agency. It's probably amusing to some people, but that's how we are policed. That's how our ethical behavior is governed. It's governed by other attorneys, and so I think judges absolutely should be part of that, and there's really no question that the attorney would need to be sanctioned in that regard.
You know, sometimes attorneys have a bad reputation, and attorneys are officers of the court, and the judge who's in charge of the court is responsible to maintain the integrity of the system, and that's required so that the people in the community have faith and confidence in the criminal justice system, in the court system. So unethical conduct by attorneys cuts right to the heart of our faith in our system, and the judge needs to be actively involved in making sure that there is no unethical conduct in the courtroom and in the conduct of cases in the court, it is extremely important. We're well aware of judges, calling out attorneys, calling out unethical conduct, and reporting attorneys to the state bar. It happens. It happens fairly commonly, and it should happen, and it's really one of the important responsibilities of the circuit court judge. Thank you.
I don't stand for attorney misconduct now. If I'm on a case with another attorney and I know that attorney, he or she is doing something wrong, I'll call them out on the carpet. And if it doesn't change and it affects the case, I'll file a motion with the court and bring it to the judge's attention. I don't hesitate at all on that. It's wrong. You have certain attorneys who are bullies. You can't resolve a case with a bully. You got to slow them down. You got to show them you'll stand up to them. Bullying doesn't help the system. But you got to wake them up and try to stop them from doing that. As a judge, if I see some misconduct, it all depends on how severe it is. I would probably, if it happened in the courtroom, take them in chambers and talk to the attorney or the attorneys and find out what's going on. If it's severe enough, where it's harming others, I'd report it. No problem. I'm going to report it. You may lose your job, you may be disbarred for a while, but I'm going to report it because it's wrong. Thank you.
This is the easiest question I think we've had tonight. We've all given you the same answer. Absolutely, you need to report it to the relevant authorities, and absolutely, you need to call an attorney out if they're doing something that is in violation of the Michigan rules of professional conduct. We are all duty bound by that, and there is another special set of rules for judges that we're, as candidates, all required to follow as well, called the judicial rules of conduct, and I would follow those to the letter. I think everybody up here would. I think that it's, in a lot of ways, the question is a no-brainer. I also might consider, if it was something that I was unsure of, needed to be reported, I might consult a colleague, i.e. another judge, if I were put in that position.
We'll come back now to some questions from Judge Pytosh. The first to respond to this question will be Valerie Snyder. What are the advantages or disadvantages of establishing a drug court?
Well, a drug court is what we were all alluding to a little earlier when we were talking about ways to improve the circuit court. And a drug court is really a problem-solving court. It's a court that's designed not just to punish or provide a consequence for an action, but designed to kind of get at the root of the problem. In other words, provide some kind of treatment, provide for drug testing, provide a way to solve the problem rather than just punish the offense. So obviously the advantages are that if the program works correctly is that you reduce recidivism. You don't have people coming back to the court over and over and over again as a result of activity that probably stems from some kind of substance abuse issue. That's what we're talking about. So reducing recidivism is an advantage. That also, of course, reduces court costs. On the drug courts that have been implemented so far, the data shows that you reduce the cost of processing one defendant through the system using one of these problem-solving courts by about $1,500 for that one case. But the savings to the court is even greater because over time, you don't have that defendant coming back again going through the court on multiple occasions, so you reap the savings in that way as well. So that's another advantage of the drug court, is that it could be a cost savings to the court as well. Now, a disadvantage to the drug court is, first of all, cost of implementation. Obviously, I haven't studied cost of implementing a drug court, so I don't know if, because of the level of criminal cases that we have in Charlevoix County Court, if the cost-benefit analysis makes sense. And the other possible disadvantage about a drug court is it has been contended that might not be the role of the court to try to go back and provide therapy or provide some kind of substance abuse counseling to get at those problems, that really the role of the court is to impose a sanction and a consequence and to deter future behavior. Thank you.
You know, you may not realize it, especially if you look around this room, in all you upstanding citizens of this county, but if you were inclined to go down to the circuit courtroom on a Friday when the judge is having his criminal docket, you'll see that drugs are a serious problem in northern Michigan. They're a serious problem in Charlevoix County. So the advantages of a drug court are obvious. You want to break the cycle. You want to address the root cause of the problem that has caused these people to break the criminal laws and to appear in the Charlevoix County Circuit Court. Obvious advantage of addressing the underlying problem. The disadvantages, again, are obvious. It's the cost. It's the cost to set up the system. The studies show that once these systems are in place, these drug courts, they actually save money in the long haul, but they're very expensive to get started. It's a huge disadvantage. And locally, we have a sobriety court in the district court system that Judge May set up. It was easier to get that started because the probation officers in the district court work for the district court judge. The probation officers in the circuit court are with the Department of Corrections. They're state employees. And their job description at the moment does not include working in a drug court. So there needs to be a fair amount of money spent up front to establish a drug court. There needs to be a lot of work and time and study put into it. That's a pretty big disadvantage, but I believe that probably in the future, it's going to take a state initiative, like Mary Beth said. It's going to have to trickle down, and the funding to set up the drug court is going to have to come from the state, but the positives outweigh the negatives. Thanks.
My first experience with the drug court was in a court in Oakland County, downstate. I was sitting in the courtroom and waiting for a case to be called, and people in there were clapping. They were hugging the judge. And I thought, you don't see people going up to the bench and hugging the judge, ever. It was a drug court. It was a drug court where the judge treated the people that are abusing as humans and saw their problem. And that's why I think we need that change here. You need to, I know people say it's a disease. Certain things are a disease and they can control it, but they can't. You can't. You got to help them in some way. And a drug court can do that. It is expensive, but that's not a disadvantage to me. You've got to pay to help people. And there is a high percentage of these people that stay sober. A long, long time, like forever. So I don't see any disadvantage at all. Thank you.
It's unrefuted in Michigan that drug courts and veterans courts and mental health courts save tax dollars. It costs between $30 and $50 a day to incarcerate someone. They help keep the same people that all of us who have extensive experience in the court system, they help keep those same people from coming back into the system over and over and over again. And that's something that's good for every single person in our community. Most importantly, and as Ed alluded to, I've talked to have done these and started these kind of courts, and I've actually observed some of the sessions. The most important thing about it for all of us is that it gives people who don't have it some hope, and it gives them some confidence, and it gives them support that sometimes none of them have ever had in their whole life. And those people, if it just affects just one of them, the statistics show it affects a ton of them. A lot of them you don't see back. Justice Robert Young just released a report on May 14th that I actually quoted from in my response to the News-Review question on this issue. There is no disadvantage. The people who are in drug court pay to be in it. They have an investment in it. And it's a wraparound concept where sanctions are quick and swift, but there's a counselor that helps them, there's one attorney that helps them, there's the judge, they meet, they're tested often, and they support each other in a group setting. And these are things that have been proven successes in 113 circuit courts in Michigan. And it's something I think we desperately need here. I see no disadvantage either.
You don't need me to regurgitate the advantages and disadvantages, but I want to just touch on the issue of these specific problem courts, a mental health court. One of my opponents is a proponent of mental health courts. I went to our undersheriff, Chuck Bonder, and I said, Chuck, I know there's 10 circuit courts in Michigan that have mental health courts. Would you call one of your colleagues at the jail in one of those counties and find out if this is a mental health court is something that is working, and how does it work? And you know, I pressed him, and he waited for a couple of responses from Northern Michigan, and he came back to me and said, Tom, when you have somebody that's schizophrenic, maybe they don't commit a crime, they do a lot of peculiar things, they don't belong in jail, but the community mental health facilities don't have permanent places for them, and it's a problem. And the mental health courts are something that, at least the feedback he got in return to me, was that they're just not adequate. You know, maybe if the churches got together, you've got a homeless shelter here for women that is helping women rebuild lives. Maybe those are the kind of facilities where mental health patients need to, maybe for the first time, get some love and affection and somebody to monitor them and watch their intake of medications and those sorts of things. But one thing I do agree with all my opponents, a drug court, a sobriety court has some wonderful stories of men and women whose lives have been changed. I'm sure drug courts do as well, but we need to make sure it works. We need to make sure it works. And finally, we need to make sure it works before we go out and spend and create more bureaucracy. So I asked Chuck, look at some other of his colleagues in this area, and at least, and the problem, of course, the mental health court, the feedback I got is that it's not helping. Thank you.
We'll have another question from Judge Pytosh. This one will be first answered by Roy Hayes. Who should have control over the management of a case through the court? The attorneys handling the case or the court?
The attorneys would love to have control over the way the case proceeds through court. Unfortunately, that's not going to work from experience. The judge has to control the progress of a case. The judge has to set deadlines. The judge has to enforce the deadlines. The judge has to make the attorneys toe the line. And the judge ultimately has the state court administrator's office who set guidelines for how the cases are supposed to proceed through the system. And the judge is the one responsible for making sure that the cases work their way through the system in orderly fashion. It definitely cannot be left up to the attorneys. Yeah, that's easy. Thanks.
I've been an attorney for 25 years, and older attorneys have told me stories where there were no rules set in place, and the attorneys did what they want. It was chaos. Judge Pytosh, if you don't know this, when a case is filed and an answer is filed, he sets a scheduling conference. The two attorneys, usually if there's only two, show up in his chambers, and they discuss cutoff dates, things that have to be done, and that becomes an order. You got to follow that order. We need that type of order. I love what Judge Pytosh has done regarding that scheduling conference. In the paper, if you didn't read the article that came out today, I would tweak it a little bit, but not much. We need that structure, because there are certain attorneys that have used the system. We can't have it. Thank you.
To me, there's no question that the court needs to be, the judge needs to manage the docket and not the attorneys. I think probably all the candidates would agree with that. The courts actually in Michigan have performance measures that the higher court in Lansing imposes on them, and it's meant to get dockets, keep dockets moving, which keeps cases moving, which makes people get decisions in cases that are important to them. They don't want to have a divorce case, for example, languish for over a year in the cases that have children. They don't want cases without children to languish more than 6 months. These are all performance measures that circuit judges across the state have to abide by and follow, and that's just the reality of it. So any suggestion that the attorneys should manage the docket is ludicrous, because in the end, we're all here to serve the public, not lawyers, individual lawyers. Thank you.
There's an old expression, I shared it down in Boise last week, the difference between a civil attorney and a criminal attorney. The civil attorney is always prepared, never ready. The criminal attorney is never prepared, always ready. And that is probably the one reason you need the judge to set a scheduling conference order, but a schedule and a calendar together to make sure the attorneys play this out in a efficient and reasonably quick way. Now, that doesn't mean, in my opinion, if I was a judge and there's legitimate reasons, we have witnesses that become unavailable, we have lots of issues like that crop up from time to time, but that shouldn't be that the attorneys can't approach a judge and say we need a reasonable adjournment for a week, a month. But an adjournment to the next millennium is certainly unacceptable, and the judge needs to monitor that and write herd on that.
Well, I agree, of course. This is kind of a no-brainer question. Of course, the judge needs to control his or her own docket. It's the judge's job to ensure the efficient administration of justice, and that's what scheduling is all about. In the local circuit court, what happens right now is that attorneys have input into scheduling. So you have a scheduling conference order, you have input into it, and so there's really not a lot of excuse to not comply with the scheduling conference order. Certainly things come up, judges should be able to consider those things and amend deadlines if necessary, but I really think this is one of the most important things that the judge does to serve the people of the county, is to keep cases moving through the system efficiently. Thank you.
All right, one more question here from the Attorney General. The first to answer this question is going to be Edward Engstrom. Straightforward question. Have you ever been disciplined by the Bar Association?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Not me.
No.
No.
Okay. Back around to a question from Judge Bytosh then. Another very simple, straightforward question. The first to answer this one will be Mary Beth Kerr. Why do you want to be a judge?
Well, that's real simple. Because I want to help people. And I loved helping people when I was the prosecutor, and I love helping people as an attorney. I would love to have an opportunity to act in a different role. In the role of an attorney, you need to be an advocate, and you need to represent your client to the best of your ability, even sometimes when you don't necessarily agree with your client's position. You need to operate within the bounds of the law and do that. As a judge, you have to have a different temperament, and you have to be a little more reserved and have quiet contemplation and listen to everyone, and again act as a referee. And I just think it's a natural progression for me, having the experience that I have in the length of time that I've been doing what I've been doing, the types of cases that I've been doing, that I could be an asset to the bench here in Charlevoix County.
Clients have said to me many, many times over the years, you say, well, the judge is going to be mad about that, or the judge is going to be mad about this, and the judge is going to be mad if I say that, or if the judge is going to... that's an access question. That's a voicing question. I want to be your judge, number one, because everybody needs a voice. Everybody should have a voice that can be heard and not be ridiculed because they have an opinion they want to share with the judge. That's number one. Number two, I have clients that could live out on this lake, they could buy anything. You name it, they could buy it. I have clients that can hardly afford 2 cans of beans, and I treat them all the same. I always have, and that's the number one quality that you want in a judge.
My decision to run for judge is one that has really probably been about 20 years in the making. I've spent that long practicing law in Charlevoix, and I've also spent a lot of time doing a lot of elected and appointed and volunteer roles. And those roles are all public servant type of roles. I mean, I've served on county commission, I've served on city council. I'm in my 7th year on the school board, and those are all roles that you do because you care about making your community better. And I think being a judge is really the same thing. At the heart of it, a judge is really a public servant. A judge is a public servant who happens to have legal experience. And that is exactly my background. It brings together my public servant background and my legal experience background, and it's the perfect blend of those 2 experiences. And I think that's why I would make an ideal candidate for circuit court judge. Thank you.
I agree the judge is first and foremost a public servant, but I don't believe the judge is somebody who just happens to have legal experience. This is a very important, very technical position that impacts the day-to-day lives of Charlevoix County. So the important decisions that get made and affect our daily lives are going to be made in the Charlevoix County Circuit Court. I was inspired to do this by my father's legal career, the public service that my father did, the good things that he did through his legal career to serve the public. I made some sacrifices when I decided 20 years ago to come to Charlevoix County and not to go to St. Louis or Kansas City or Detroit or Chicago. And I turned down some experiences to take some other tracks within the legal community. This is what I've been pointing to for 20 years. I've been waiting for my opportunity. I did not put my name in the hat to be the district court judge. I have a lot of respect for Judge May, I have a lot of respect for Judge Earhart, but I wanted to be the circuit court judge. I think this is the most important position in Charlevoix County, and I believe that I'm the best candidate to do this and to serve Charlevoix County, and that's why I want to do it.
I don't know if everyone in this room knows, but when I started my campaign, I said I was going to do the hardest thing you can do in a campaign and go door to door. I started on May 3rd, and I've been to houses of over 3,600 voters. And occasionally they would say, "Are you sure you want to be a judge?" And I'd ask them why they said that. And they said, because of the problems our county has had in the past. Well, I didn't think about those problems, and those are in the past. It's history. I'm being a judge for the future. I'm being a judge because over 25 years I've gained tremendous patience with people. I listen to people. I hear what they're saying. I hear exactly what they're saying. And from what they're saying, I can solve problems. I've got tremendous experience to be a good judge, not just legal, life experience. I enjoy life every day. I cross the bridge, I look out at the pier, and I smile. It's a great place to live. Every day. Today, you know what made today's a great day? I was coming back from lunch, and I saw a father on a riding tractor. He had hooked up his kid's wagon. He was pulling around the yard. Simple things in life. I take the simple approach. Common sense approach as a judge is what I do. Don't mess up people's lives, and you won't have a problem with me as a judge. If you mess up other people's lives and you harm them, you'll have a problem. I'll be firm but fair. Thank you.
We will have now another question from the Attorney General's office. This one, well, it assumes that you get elected. The question says, and Tom Shaw, you'll be the first to answer this one. When you retire from the bench, should you be elected, what do you hope your legacy will be?
This is kind of funny because I'm the oldest one here of the judge candidates, and it's filtered back to me that some of my opponents thought, well, he's supposed to be retired, isn't he? I'm eligible to run for 2 terms. It would be a 12-year stint if I was elected and re-elected. If I were to retire, I would like my legacy to say that people remember me for being a listener, for being open to criticism, to having an open dialogue ongoing with the practicing attorneys in the county. And I would like the community to recognize me as somebody they didn't have to fear when they came into my court, that they could always have a voice, and I was willing to listen.
I think the most important thing that I would want people to remember if I'm so fortunate to retire from the bench someday is that I was fair, that I was fair and impartial, that it didn't matter to me what person was standing before me, what the issue was before me, that I treated everyone the same, that everyone who came into my courtroom came in on even footing, that no one had a leg up over anyone else, that they got a decision that was completely impartial, they got a decision that didn't play favorites, and they got a decision that complied with the law. And I think if a judge can walk away from the bench with people saying those things about her, then that's a pretty good legacy. Thank you.
I'm not sure how commonly known this is, but a lot of judges, they become pretty full of themselves, and they think they're pretty important, and they can be kind of difficult. And one of the things that I would like my legacy to be is that my personality never changed. I've seen it. I've known lawyers who they had a certain personality when they were practicing law, and I've seen how their personalities changed over years on the bench. I hope, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that I never suffer that fate, that my personality never changes, that I never become full of myself or difficult to be around. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is obvious. I hope that my legacy would be that I always made fair and just decisions that were in the best interests of Charlevoix County and that were consistent with the law.
I want to be known as a person who listened, who understood when they listened, and came to a right decision, whether good or bad. You're going to take some slack as a judge. You're going to see articles in the paper where maybe the press didn't think you made a good decision. But of course, the press wasn't in the courtroom and didn't hear all the facts. They don't know all the issues. I want to be known as a judge that has tremendous patience. You get a lot of people that represent themselves, and they'll argue a bizarre theory. I had a divorce case where a gentleman was part of the Michigan militia. He was on the other side, representing himself. He believed in the Uniform Commercial Code for businesses would apply to a divorce case. It was just the most bizarre thing I've seen. Judge Petoskey handled that case, and he would hold up the court rules and tell the gentleman, you better get these court rules, because I've never heard of the UCC being applied in a divorce case. He had so much patience, and that's one of the things I absorbed from Judge Petoskey. Other things that I've absorbed from judges is, you got a dictator judge. That's just wrong. We don't need dictator judges. I know of dictator judges. I know dictator judges have caused some attorneys to cry in court. That's just wrong. Thing I want to be, and if I get there to be a dictator judge, somebody tell me, because I'll retire then. Thank you.
No, I agree with Joe. We've all seen people that have been elected to the bench and they get the way he described it. A lot of lawyer jargon, we call that black robe disease. And I hope to be remembered as never ever having black robe disease. I hope to be remembered as somebody who's respectful of everyone involved in the system, who's fair but firm, and somebody who gave everybody a fair shot and had no favorites. I think our current judge is one of those people, and I think that I've heard a lot of people say they don't want him to retire, and I think that's the highest compliment that you can give someone. And I would hope that if I were elected, that lawyers and people in the community would feel the same way.
Okay, now we're back to a couple more questions from Judge Petoskey. This one will be first answered by Valerie Snyder. In your opinion, what is the most important case decided by the Michigan Supreme Court in the past year, and why?
I always seem to get the tough ones first. Last time I got the who is your favorite Supreme Court justice and why question first. So the most important case decided by the Michigan Supreme Court in the last year. I'm going to go with, well, I don't know, most important to me and my client would be a case that I had decided by the Michigan Supreme Court in the last year, which was a case that involved real property rights right here in Charlevoix County. So I thought that was one of the most important. But I think on an overreaching level, it's probably the right to work cases, or the right to work case. I think that's probably had the biggest impact on the state of Michigan, really kind of for obvious reasons. So, thank you.
That's a tough question. It's a sort of a gotcha question. And rather than sit up here and wiggle and squirm, you know, first of all, I think we've all been pretty busy for the past 6 months. And we haven't had, a lot of leisure time to be reading Michigan Supreme Court cases. I also have had a pretty busy law practice that I've been trying to keep up on as well. So I don't have a good answer to this question. And we, as lawyers, we read the Michigan Supreme Court cases that apply to the issues that affect our clients in the case at hand. And I haven't picked a case to answer this question with.
I don't have a case in mind myself, but like I told you, I do read our journal, Lawyers Weekly, and I do attend seminars, so there are cases out there, but I don't pay much attention to the exact name unless I need to cite it in a motion or some kind of legal pleading. I pay attention to the substance, and most of the cases I pay attention to are cases that upheld your rights. We seem to be losing some of our rights here and there, and we need cases to support your rights. And I just love a case where the justices have found that somebody's rights were violated, and there should be some type of relief for it, or it should stop. We don't need certain individuals getting out of control. Thank you.
You know, like everybody else sitting up here, I confess I don't have the Michigan Supreme Court reporter sitting on my nightstand. And I've been looking at a lot of different things other than those types of cases over the last couple of months. But there are a couple that have come out recently that I've been made aware of. I don't know the names of them. But one of them was a case in criminal situations that said that the courts can no longer impose what they termed fines and costs, which I think is going to have a legislative fix, but basically the Supreme Court said that there's no legal basis to do it without some legislation, which is going to have a dramatic effect on all of us in the local systems, because fines and costs in some ways support the court system. Another case that was important in the criminal arena that I would remark on is one that held that restitution can't be ordered for unconvicted offenses. So a lot of times if you have a case where there's been multiple break-ins, for example, you can have a plea to one and then they can pay restitution on everything, every person whose house they broke into. Supreme Court of Michigan said that you can no longer do that. So those are two that are rather significant to me, and I think to the community, that I would remark on.
Your rights are really, really important. And I'm going to credit my son, Joel Shaw, has been practicing with me for 7 years, and he's had a couple great results down in Oceana County and then here in Charlevoix County. And they were searching whether or not the police officer had a reasonable suspicion to stop somebody. And I think the Supreme Court case, and I think it's People versus Lundgren, but don't quote me, Steve Zucker, on that. But it, you know, we all want to have a civil community. We want to have people held to a high standard. But we don't want to have our own space invaded by a police officer when he really doesn't have a reasonable suspicion to stop us. So that's the kinds of cases I think that are really important for the community at large. You view yourself as a law-abiding citizen, but in one particular case, if you lived in a condo and the police officer thought he saw you evade a gated community and go around it, and you showed him proof that you lived in this condominium, you showed him proof that you have his driver's license, that's where it should end. But when they hold you outside in this January day for about 30 minutes interrogating you, that's where the Supreme Court draws a line, and it's important to protect those rights.
All right, we are now drawing toward the conclusion of the forum, and we've come to the time where each of our candidates will be given 5 minutes to offer a summary statement. The first to speak in summary tonight will be Roy Hayes.
I think I've already said that I believe that this election will have more impact on the daily lives of the people in our community than any election since Judge Pytosh was elected 30 years ago. As I've already said, most of the important legal decisions that impact daily life here are made in the Charlevoix County Circuit Court, and they will be made in the Charlevoix County Circuit Court in the years to come. You would not have shown up here tonight and sat through 2 hours worth of this if you didn't think this was important, so I commend you on that. And I think that you have, because you came here and you took time out of your lives and you sat through all this and paid attention, I'm really impressed. You have a better view, you have more of a basis to make an informed vote than most people do. But we all have a track record at the courthouse over the course of years and years. And we have a track record that's well known within the criminal justice system, and it's been 20 years for me. So this is a small community, and I've been telling people Talk to the people in the system. Talk to the people who work in the courthouse. Talk to the law enforcement officers. Talk to the people in the front of the court's office. Talk to the people who know us well and who have known us well for many, many years, because this is a very important decision. Some of these people have gone public. I've got signs in the yards of state police troopers and Charlevoix County Sheriff's deputies and attorneys who practice in the circuit court and city police officers in the county. I've got some very public endorsements by George Lassiter, who was the former Charlevoix County Sheriff for most of my career as an attorney. I've got a very public endorsement from Richard May, who was the Charlevoix County and Emmett County District Court Judge for 17 years. I practiced in front of Judge May on a regular basis for 17 years. So I think his endorsement should mean a lot. What I'm asking you to do, because this is so important, is to reach out and do your research. This is very, very important. Please make an informed decision. This is going to be probably a long-term decision, and you have my commitment, my firm commitment, my promise that I will try to make decisions that are fair and just, that I will treat everybody with respect, that there will be no favorites, and that I will try to follow the law in every case without influence from personal bias or any inappropriate influence at all. And I'll try to do the right thing for Charlevoix County. And I hope you consider voting for me. Thank you.
The odds are a lot of you already figured out who you're going to vote for. Some of you may have not made that decision. You came here today to be educated about who we are. And I've been doing that, walking door to door. I go to the houses, I introduce myself. At first, before I introduced myself, you could tell a lot of people didn't want anything to do with me because they thought I was trying to sell them something. Well, I wasn't trying to sell anything. I wasn't trying to sell myself. I was trying to educate them so they could decide between the five of us who they think is the best for the job. And my platform has been do the hardest thing, do it as much as you can, get to the people, listen to the people, absorb what they say, and use it later on if I win the election. And that's what I've been doing. I've gone to a lot of houses, very friendly people once they know why I'm there. I've gone to houses with the other candidate's sign out front. Now, is that gutsy? Yeah, that's gutsy. But I talk to them. Sometimes I talk to them for 20 minutes. I don't try to change their mind. I just talk to them who I am. And I leave it like this. I say, well, if the person you support doesn't make it, could you consider me if I do make the 1 or 2 spot? And they're fine with that. I never push myself on them. Like I said, I'm not going to be a dictator judge if I win. I'm not a dictator person now. I just don't have that personality. But I know right and wrong. If somebody's wrong, I'll stand up and do what is necessary. I'm a true believer in volunteering my services. I was a soccer coach for 7 years, and I told the kids, follow the rules and respect others. I had fun. It was a great time. My daughter was on my team for 7 years until she got old enough. And between some of that time, I was also, and I still am, a volunteer mediator at the center. And like I told you, I volunteer for tough cases. So that volunteer work, I commend the other candidates for volunteering. That work is connected directly to the legal system. I'm doing work on divorce cases, learning people's problems, different problems, because everyone's unique. Everyone's got a different personality. You learn how to deal with each and every unique individual and how to solve a problem. And that's what I would do if I'm a judge. I will do my best to solve it the proper way, in the best interest of the parties involved. When I went door to door, I met a 91-year-old man in Hayes Township, beautiful rolling hills, and he told me about after 20 minutes, Ed, you can't change politics. You got to conform with our local politics or you're going to lose. And what he was talking about is, I have to jump on the wagon and be either a Democrat or Republican. All right? I told him it's nonpartisan. But he said, Ed, it'd take 200 of you to change the system. I'm asking you to help me change the system. Don't think like a Democrat or Republican when you vote, because the ballot, and I have a copy here, says nonpartisan. This is a real ballot, it's approved that they sent. What you need to do when you go in to vote, and you don't need to do this actually, but what I hope you would do is you write down your party affiliation, Democrat or Republican. You fold it in half, and you throw it in the garbage can. All right? Throw it in the garbage can. And think like an employer. What qualifications do the 5 of us have that makes that person the best for the job? And I believe, if you heard what I said today, and you did your research on me, I have the best qualifications overall for the job. Thank you.
Thank you again to all of the people that helped put this together tonight, Christine Vosk and John Haggard, the chairs of the respective political parties in this county. Thank you again for being here. I told you in my opening remarks that I do mediation, and I've also litigated some very hotly contested cases. And when I mediate hotly contested cases, or if I'm trying to settle a case to avoid a costly trial for my client, I usually like to start out by finding some common ground. And as I sat here tonight in the middle of this hotly contested judicial race, listening to all my colleagues who all want the same job that I do, it's apparent to me that all of us sitting here at this table share a lot of common ground. But we also have our differences, and in the end, I believe that how or where we differ from one another is perhaps what should be the deciding factor for you when you vote next week. Everybody up here is a highly educated lawyer with years and years of legal experience in circuit courts and appellate courts in Michigan. And everybody up here has worked very, very hard to get where they are in life. Everybody up here has a family and children that they love dearly, and we've all volunteered our time to a variety of important causes and organizations. And we've all put a lot of time and energy into this race, and to say that it's a huge commitment to run for this office would probably be the greatest understatement of the evening. It's a decision that I personally gave a considerable amount of thought to. And I decided to run because, for the same reason I decided to go to law school and become a lawyer, because I want to help people in the best way I know how using my education. And what I bring to the table tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that's different, and what sets me apart from the others is that I have a lot of experience already in protecting the public in the criminal arena. I have experience as a prosecutor, and I've been an integral part of holding thousands of criminals responsible in our community for their behavior over the years. And there are over 100 felonies cases that go through this circuit court right here in Charlevoix County on average every year. And heaven forbid that any of us are directly affected by the types of horrible crimes that our circuit court handles. But I believe, and I think you should understand, that we are all indirectly affected by crime in our neighborhoods, and through our pocketbooks is how we're affected as hard-working taxpayers. We all pay the price. And the people from all over the county that I have talked to for the last several months who are supporting me all say they want a judge who is going to reflect the pulse of our community in the sentencing of felons. Somebody that will hold them accountable and still be fair. I think that's what matters to a lot of people. It matters and makes a difference that I've practiced on both sides of the courtroom, and I believe that my experience in that regard would serve me well on the bench. And so I would leave you with a couple thoughts tonight. First of all, I would ask for your vote. I would say that you should choose a candidate that you believe will best handle the challenges that a circuit judge faces every single day, and who will strive to follow the great example that our outgoing circuit judge, Richard Petoskey, has set for us all. I believe that person is me, and I hope you do too. I would be grateful for your consideration, and I hope that you exercise your right to vote next Tuesday, no matter what. Thank you very much, and good night.
Well, I'd like to congratulate my opponents, because you really don't know how difficult this is, and I had no idea when I decided back in February to throw my hat in the ring, just the time commitment it takes. So I want to congratulate them. They're all working hard. I also want to thank my campaign committee. Several of them are here tonight, and they've worked awful hard. And sometimes I sit back and wonder, why are they doing that? You know, and it's dawned on me that they're doing it because I have a reputation for fairness. I have a reputation for character. I have on my website, I've listed people in our community in Charlevoix, as well as East Jordan, as well as Boyne City, as well as Point Falls, people you probably know. And I think the only reason you wouldn't vote for me is because you don't know me. So I'm inviting you to call somebody on that list and ask them about Tom Schraw. And I'm confident that if you do that, if you do the research, now I know some of you have a strong allegiance to your candidate now, and you've got signs in your yard, and I appreciate that. You got some of those big, scary signs. I just have to say, if I find out which one of you four is defacing my signs, I'm going to be real upset about it. But I've listed people that in our community, in your community, that know me well, and I'm inviting you to call them and ask them about. I want to give you just one little, another little insight, a marker in my life, a buoy in my life. I told you I was the oldest of 7. One of my youngest sisters had a very serious birth defect, and this is the early 60s. And it fell to the oldest son to accompany his mother to the surgeries down in Ann Arbor at the U of M Children's Hospital. And I've always felt that experience has been a huge marker in my life. Now, I never sought anything called a public servant role. If you'll take my literature back there and you'll flip to the back side, you'll see that I've volunteered for 23 years at the Nehemiah Homeless Shelter. You'll find that I've been a pro bono counsel for the Charlevoix Humane Society, for the Challenge Mountain organization over in Boyne City that helps handicapped children and their families enjoy the ski hills. That is not a public servant role, and I've never made a public issue out of it. But I want you to know this is the kind of person I've become, and because of that marker, because of going to that children's hospital when I was 13, 14, and 15 years old, I've always felt that if we were all required to spend one day a year at that children's hospital, we'd have a different state to live in. Now, in closing, I'd say, I know I'm going to offend some Democrats in the room, but Ronald Reagan said, we can't help everybody, but everybody can help somebody. And that's who I am, that's how I'm built. I'd invite you to take my literature, I'd invite you to go on my website and call your friends that know me, the people that I've served in this community, in Charlevoix Township, in Marion Township, throughout the years, and I'm confident that if you'll do that, I'll be your next judge. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your patience this evening, and since I'm going last, I know you want me to hurry it on up. The circuit court judge's position is a very important position. The decisions that come out of the circuit court really are decisions that impact people's lives every day. And certainly the decisions about what to do with criminal defendants are important, not just to the criminal defendants, but to the families, to the victims, to everyone who's associated with that case. There's also a whole other side of the civil court, of the circuit court, that impacts people every day, and that's the civil side of it. That's the domestic relations, it's your divorces, it's your child custody, it's parenting time, and then it's real estate disputes. Things that you might, in fact, actually find yourself standing in front of the circuit court judge about someday. So it's important to consider all those qualifications and to have a judge that has experience in as many of those different capacities as possible. You have been encouraged to go ask people about the candidates. You've been encouraged to go talk to people at the courthouse, to talk to people in the system and find out what they think. And I would encourage you to do that as well. And in fact, I have done that. Well, you should know that I've done that because remember the lesson I told you about when I stood up? My dad taught me to learn from others. So I talk to people and I'm frankly pretty pleased with what they have to say. So I would encourage you to do that as well. I want to talk about one more lesson that my dad taught me before I sit down. One thing my dad taught me was to be independent. And that doesn't mean, of course, that you don't need other people in your life. Of course you do. But there comes a time when everyone needs to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. When you need to be able to swim or drown trying. And that is how I have run this campaign. I am standing here before you running on my qualifications, running on my merits, and by God, I will sink or I will swim on my own qualifications. I was not inspired or motivated to run for judge because of what anyone else did or because of what my father did or because of what my mother did. I was inspired and motivated to run for judge because of what I have done. Because I have spent 20 years practicing law, caring about people, wanting to get good results for them, loving being an advocate for people. I have also spent almost as much time being a public servant. And when I say public servant, I mean public servant. I am talking about serving on the school board. That is a public servant role. That is what you're doing. I'm talking about being a county commissioner. I'm talking about being on city council. Those are public servant roles, and I get what that means. You don't do that for the money, believe me, you don't do it for the money. You don't do it for the glory. You're not there making friends. You do it because you care, and that's why I do it, and that is the attitude that I would take to the bench as well. I've also done the volunteer work. We've all done the volunteer work. We've all coached our kids in soccer. I've served on Keep Charlevoix Beautiful. We've all been out there planting petunias. We do the volunteer work, and we do that work for the same reason, because we care. So I have been working hard as a lawyer. I've been working hard as a community member, and believe me, I've been working hard on this campaign. I have the shoes to prove it too. And I've been honored to serve you in the roles that I've already been able to serve you. I'm honored to be a lawyer in this community, and I would be honored to serve as your next circuit court judge as well. Thank you for your time tonight.